Module 1, Part 4, Personality Types. So we're getting further into the personality dimensions, and we're on the second to last dimension, which is thinking versus feeling. Now, this one is a little tricky because it's easy to just write it off and say, I think and I feel, so how could I possibly choose just one or the other? Because it appears as though we have to dissociate ourselves from one or the other when we know both are important, so it's a little bit disingenuous to feel like you have to choose. But don't approach it that way, because you'll learn that we actually do use both quite a bit, and they balance each other really well. And there also is a gender socialization component to this one too, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But first, I'm going to minimize myself so that I don't influence you too much in this presentation, and then eventually I will disappear so I don't distract you, because I really want us to get after what this one is about. This one's particularly tough to engage in the determination of am I this or that. So let's jump in. Thinker or feeler? And again, this doesn't get into good versus bad or anything like that. So first, thinker or feeler is really about the way we make decisions and come to conclusions, mostly from a position of objectivity or subjectivity. And as you may consider, sometimes we need to be more subjective and really consider the context, the details, and how things feel, versus being objective, just orienting ourselves from the facts and our own observations. So a mixture of both can make you a very strong decision maker, but we usually at least originate from just one side or another. So first, thinkers prefer decisions that make sense logically and pride themselves on their ability to be objective by analyzing and weighing the evidence, even if the ultimate conclusion is unpleasant, right? So it's about getting after the truth. Feelers, on the other hand, prefer decisions based on how much they care or what they feel is right, and they pride themselves on being empathetic and compassionate. So if, for example, we were going to maybe do a presentation to a client, a customer, or a stakeholder in an organization, it would be really good to have a thinker and a feeler on the project, and this is why. The thinker is going to make sure that the pitch is absolutely perfect, that all the facts and the necessary items are there to put together a persuasive argument. The feeler is going to be good at gauging the temperature of the room to see how it's received and make necessary suggestions or adjustments if the reception of it is not going well. So think of the thinker as a good pitcher and the feeler as someone that can kind of do damage control when things go wrong. So they're both very, very needed as far as getting to the outcome of being successful. So obviously thinkers and feelers express different priorities, but I don't want you to get caught up in thinking that one is rational and one is irrational, because nothing could be further from the truth, okay? They are simply making decisions from different positions and using different information to inform those decisions, and both of those decisions can be entirely rational based on the information they use. So try to keep yourself from going into rationality or irrationality. One note before we move on, and I'll maybe appear one more time for this one. So this one has a very strong gender association. So when we talk about thinking and feeling, often our own gender roles and gender socialization will get into how society grooms or expects men or women to behave, given their assigned roles in their own culture. So often men will be subscribed to be the thinkers, and women will be subscribed to be the feelers. And it's really a disservice to let gender determine this for us, because we definitely have people, regardless of gender, that just are more oriented toward thinking or feeling. And oftentimes it is kind of a built-in social penalty to operate differently. So men who feel more are seen as less masculine, and women who think more are seen as less feminine. And again, that's really an unfair judgment to put upon people, because people are merely feeling and thinking in the way that works for how they perceive the world and what makes them effective, comfortable, and how they naturally operate. So gender is, again, something that we're socialized to, and I want to make sure that I leave that emphasis there. So it's easy to put a thinker as, the hunter, the competitor, someone that's going to behave more like a detached, unemotional creature that's really going to, go after life and get to the critical means of achievement. And then, on the other hand, you have the feeler, who is supposed to be the life giver, the nurturer, someone who's compassionate and sympathetic and supportive, kind of picking up the pieces when mistakes are made. And again, strong gender socialization with mother and father roles, with sister-brother roles, and husbands and wives or romantic partner roles. So this is something to keep in mind, and why we tend to struggle with this one is because we feel like if we reveal more of thinking or feeling that might be less common or less acceptable with our gender, that we must be committing a crime against our gender. And in order to save face, we will backtrack or backpedal because we don't want to appear less feminine or less masculine, because it may not be in our best interest to do so. But again, I want you to be really true to yourself and confident and honest about where you operate, because the more specific you are and the more honest you are, the more liberalized you will be in truly embracing your own potential and being successful in your endeavors. So just keep that in mind. All right, now disappearing. Let's go more deeply into thinkers. So thinkers incorporate a very rational way of making decisions, again, using criteria based upon concrete evidence. Thinkers will often ask for justifications if outcomes and punishments appear unfair, too lenient, ineffective, inconsistent, or disproportionate. Being fair is actually very important to thinkers because they want things to be distributed equally. It's easier to defend it when they are. Thinkers will struggle to understand sometimes why people are the way they are because it just doesn't make sense. So thinkers may find themselves in confrontation, often feeling confused and sorting through more why did that happen or what did I do wrong rather than how the other person's feeling and why someone's hurt. So occasionally these people are so analytical that they may appear cold and unfeeling, but that is not very accurate. It's just that their priorities are quite different, maybe than yours. If you think someone's cold and unfeeling, it might be because you are more of a feeler. So again, it just depends on the situation, but just realize that thinkers do have emotions and personal values, and feelers can be perfectly logical and prefer evidence-based arguments. So again, each of us use one process more naturally and more often and more successfully than another. So this is just something to keep in mind as you're drilling down into this. Finally, rounding out thinkers, they appreciate promotion based upon competence and results. They operate well in environments emphasizing policy. So they are rule followers and they like to operate within those lines. It's not that they wouldn't challenge a rule if it appears illogical or disproportionate or unfair, but they prefer operating within definitions because it's easier to do so. They are naturally honest and cool-headed and can sort through tense situations easily because it's a little easier for them to detach emotionally and just do some fact-finding, which can be very, very needed when things get heated or hot. Going more into feelers, feelers will incorporate also a rational way of making decisions, but using criteria based upon personal morality. So if it doesn't make sense objectively or from a fairness point of view, they may also just say, but it's the right thing to do. It might not be the way you would do it, but the outcome justifies the means, right? And so they kind of go after what is right, and what's going to get us the ultimate outcome, maybe more so than what's logical. They're very natural at nurturing, providing support, gleaning insight, and being empathetic toward others. Occasionally they are so involved that they may appear overly emotional or even unintelligent, and that's kind of unfair for feelers because we have something called emotional intelligence where you get a good read on other people and can navigate emotions easily. So that is a skill that employers do value. So some people kind of cut to the chase and say, okay, thinkers are meat and potatoes and feelers are a dessert bar. And I guess that's an analogy you could use, but again, we want to delve deeper into it. So feelers appreciate promotion based on loyalty and potential. They operate well in environments emphasizing standards and purpose. They attach to people, principles, and causes. They invigorate life with contexts and considerations, and they easily identify those who are hurting or vulnerable in order to assist them. So there are a lot of clashes that naturally emerge between thinkers and feelers, as you can imagine. Again, thinkers might be confused about what went wrong, and feelers are hurt and angry and feel like, they're picking up the pieces. So when you pair feelers and thinkers together, they benefit from the contrasting strengths and weaknesses that they both present. So again, keep in mind that they are complementary. And again, they can both get to great decision making if they do a little give and take with each other. So again, focus on this list. Think about whether you're a feeler or not, and that will help you. So here's the famous document I usually bring up rounding out the lecture. Usually I put this in the beginning of the lecture, but I thought I'd save it more for the end. So I will reappear hello in the bottom of the screen just to walk you through this. So this is the personality type estimator that gives you kind of the list of criteria to consider. So let's start on the thinking side first so we can cut through those facts more easily. So if you're a thinker, you step back and you apply impersonal analysis to problems. You value logic, justice, fairness, and one standard for all. You naturally see flaws and tend to be critical. You may be seen as heartless, insensitive, and uncaring. You consider it more important to be truthful than tactful, and you believe feelings are valid only if they are logical and they lead to some logical outcome. You are motivated by a desire for achievement and accomplishment. So that's the thinker side. Let's move over to the feeling side. So feelers will step forward and kind of plunge headfirst into things, considering the effect of their action on others, because not acting quickly enough could have emotional consequences. So that's why they're going to be a little more proactive. And they value empathy and harmony, even at the expense of getting something wrong, right? They see the exception to the rule. They naturally like to please others, and they show appreciation easily. They may be seen as over-emotional, illogical, and weak. They consider it important to be tactful as well as truthful, but again, sometimes tact is more important to them than truth, or they can get after truth maybe in a different manner or a more appropriate circumstance, because they're all about consideration. They believe any feeling is valid, whether it makes sense or not, which is tough for the thinkers to accept. They are motivated by a desire to be appreciated. And so recognition programs go really far with feelers, and kind of merit-based achievement goes very far with thinkers, where their accomplishments are celebrated. So hopefully this helps you sort through thinking or feeling and come to a conclusion about where you fall on this personality dimension. We'll see you in the next lecture.